Here's a shot I recently took for a client. Straight out of camera and unedited. Rough, right? Flat, kind of lifeless, and lacks color. But here's that exact shot after I ran it through my editing workflow. This is the exact process to import, cull, edit, and export your photos that I use on every shoot. And by the end of this video, you'll be able to do the exact same thing to speed up and improve your workflow. So let's get into it. The first step is to import all of our raws into the library. I like to straight away add them to a new collection that briefly describes what and when the event occurred. In the library tab, we're going to double click on the first photo, and using the arrow keys on the keyboard, we're going to go through every photo and press P to flag as a pick if we're going to edit that photo, or U to unpick that photo. We're going to go through and select every photo that we want to edit. Once you've gone through and selected every photo you want to edit, we're going to come down to filters and hit flagged. This will now show every photo that you want to edit. We're now going to create what's called the base preset, which is the preset we apply to all of the images as our starting edit. We do this by selecting the most average image out of the gallery, which for this gallery looks to be this one. We're going to now head over to the Develop tab to start editing our photo. For the base preset, we're only going to edit aspects that will be applicable to all of the photos. We're first going to start with the exposure, and just by looking at this image, we can tell that it was a bright sunny day, so the highlights are overexposed, meaning that these shadows are also underexposed. So I'm going to head over to the exposure and bring down the highlights and bring up the shadows. Now to bring up contrast, I usually don't like to use the contrast slider as it tends to look a little bit weird. Instead, come down to the whites and bring the whites up while holding the Alt key or Option on Mac, and you'll start to see the whites that'll be overexposed. So I like to bring so they're just peeking out. And now we're going to do the opposite with the blacks, where we're going to bring it down until some of the blacks are squashed, but overall we can keep most of the detail. For the presence of the image, I tend to only increase the dehaze slightly and the clarity, as any more it starts to look a little bit weird. Now moving over to the tone curve, I know it looks scary, but we're going to just create a very basic S-curve to add some more contrast to the image. Now what I'm going to do is right click on the tone curve, copy channel settings, and paste it to all three of the color settings. Now for the color mixer, touching these sliders individually doesn't give you a good sense of which aspects you're actually editing. So I like to go over to the point color and press on the bits that I actually want to edit. For example, these leaves look a little bit unsaturated and a little bit too bright. So I'm going to pick one of the colors of the green in the leaves, switch it to be a little bit more of a saturated green. These color grading wheels also look scary, but they're broken down into 3 sections. This color grading wheel affects the midtones, which is areas such as the leaves and the car. Since the leaves are reflecting onto the car a little bit, I want to bring out the green, so I'll increase the midtones to be towards the green. The shadows are more under the car and this bark here, so I'm going to keep that where it is, as I want to keep the dark black. The highlights will be areas such as the sky and the ground over here, so I'm going to lean towards the more orangey yellow to bring out a nice sunset sunrise colors. For the detail, even though it was in bright daylight and it was shot at 100 ISO, I still like to do a denoise as it smooths out the car and makes it look pristine. It'll also help with when you bring up the shadows, there's still noise there and it will remove them completely. And now for the sharpening. If you blast up the sharpening over the overall image, everything just looks a little off. This is why I like to bring the sharpening to around 70 and hold Alt while moving the masking slider up to sharpen only the edges of the car. Lens corrections only matter for your camera. I'm going to enable both of these. We're going to come down and add a slight vignette with a bit more feather. It really hooks the viewer into the center of the image, which is what I'm trying to attract to. Now we're going to head over to the mask area, which for the base preset, we're only going to do a few simple masks. The first mask is below the car. This mask, I'm also going to subtract the subject so we're not affecting the car. We bring the exposure down and we increase the dehaze and the clarity and the texture to give the ground a bit more of a textured look. The next mask will be our subject, which will be the car. For this mask, we're also going to increase the dehaze and the clarity just slightly to bring an extra pop to the car. I also like to bring the shadows and the exposure slightly up to also make the car pop. My third and final mask is a radial gradient coming from the source of light. In this case, the sun was in this direction, so I'm going to make a large feathered mask from the right side of the image. This is my favorite mask, as this is what brings out that nice hazy look. And to do that nice hazy look, we increase the exposure slightly, increase the temperature slightly, which I'll show you why in a second, and come down to the dehaze and the clarity. We're going to take away the dehaze so it starts to look a little bit more hazy, and take away the clarity to remove some detail from that area. The reason why we change the temperature is when you remove the dehaze all the way, without that temperature adjustment, it starts to look a little bit white. So we increase the temperature to bring that yellow back from the sun. For vibrance and saturation, I like to increase the vibrance a lot more than the saturation, as that brings out the colors that are already popping rather than the colors that don't need to pop. So now we have our base preset. This is the before, and this is the after. To save this preset, we're gonna go over to presets and hit add, and create preset. Again, name this what the shoot was and when it was. We're gonna include everything, including the masking, but we're not going to include the white balance or the exposure, as that depends on the photo. Now that we've got that preset on the left side here, we're gonna go back to the library, go into grid view, hit Control A to select all the images, go to quick develop, and click on our saved preset that we just created. Now that the preset has been applied to all of our images, we're going to go through individually and edit specific parts for that photo. For example, there's a few problems in this image from what we did with our base preset. First of all, our sun mask is on the wrong side of the image. The image is also a little bit too dark. And the image is also a little bit wonky, so we're going to transform and hit auto. I also don't like how much empty space is in the top, so I'm going to crop it slightly in and to the left, so it focuses more essentially on the car. So now the last step is to export to keep all of these details in your final post. For that, we're going to go back to the library and back to the grid view so we can see all the images, hit Control A again to select all the images, go to File, Export, and this is where we're going to export with the proper settings. You're first going to choose your location. I like to put it in a subfolder called Edited. For the file settings, we're going to keep it a JPEG, but we're going to increase the quality to 100 and do not limit the file size. We're also going to make sure that the color space is on sRGB and not Adobe RGB. We're also going to sharpen for screen and amount standard. You also want to remove the location info of your shoot to not give it away to other people. Once you've done that, we can hit export. And that is the exact process I used to take photos like this into this. Let me know if you'd like to see my entire process of how I took this photo.